Welcome to the SaaS AdLab podcast, where we into the stories of SaaS founders, entrepreneurs, and CEOs. My name is Luis. I'm the founder of Fantôm Agency, a digital marketing agency specialized in scaling SaaS companies. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Rodion. He is the CEO over at Poster. First of all, thank you so much for being on here today. It's a pleasure having you. And to kick things off, why don't you just start off by telling everyone a little bit more about yourself, your background, and then lead into really what was the reason that you started the company in the first place.
All right. Thank you for having me, Lewis, today. Very happy to be here. I'm a tech entrepreneur. I'm into IT entrepreneurship for the last 10 years. Before that, I was doing just some freelance jobs, which were IT jobs as well, like design, programming. Afterwards, we started a agency with my partner and friend, and we started doing websites and mobile apps for customers. Then it went for 3 or 4 years or something, and we were just not very satisfied with doing job for the customer, because you are not able to control the final result all the time, and sometimes you just commit very much into a project and you don't like what happens in the end, what it looks like, or how it's evolving afterwards after you released it. So that's why we were always keen to launch our products. We had several ideas, several failures. One of our first more or less successful projects was a website and mobile app called The Weekend. Basically, we were scratching our itch and we wanted to make a very UX-friendly website where you could find something to do on the weekend in your city. Basically, this was like a catalog of the best venues and events, cinemas and stuff like that. And also we had like a mobile app for that, blog. And at some point, it was that time where people were having a lot of discount plastic cards for different kind of restaurants and stores and malls. And like all of my friends were like having a bunch of them in their bag, and it was really funny. So we thought maybe we could create like one discount card that you buy it for like an annual subscription, and you receive all the discounts and bonuses from like the best venues of your region, of your city. So when we started printing those cards and selling them, we've sold like 15,000 cards, and in different cities and countries. Basically, this project was scaled on a franchise model. So we had like franchisees in different countries and cities, around 15 of them. But we also found out that we don't know, we don't have any intelligence on those cards, because basically they work like a flyer. They were not integrated anyhow into the point of sale at the restaurant. So, and we wanted to know which of our card holders visited which of the restaurants or stores and what they ordered, so that we could deliver better results to the restaurant owners, and also so we could target those card holders with different different promos that they will be interested in.
Give more to the ones that are actually using it.
So at some point we understood that we kind of need to integrate with the software which runs the restaurants and stores, which is called the point of sale software. And we started just going around our partners and asking which one they're using. Basically, we understood that there is lots of them. They're very different. They don't have like that kind of friendly API, so will not be able to integrate with like any of them quickly. And we went further and we asked people if they basically like their software, because to us it looked really crappy, like something made from, I don't know, like Microsoft Access from 2000 something. And it was kind of funny because, it was 2012 and you already had Dropbox, like Twitter, any software for your MacBook, like anything. And it had all these nice interfaces for the consumer software, but the software that businesses were using was like awful. So, and we found out that basically this is not only ours concern, because people hated it. So they had to spend a lot of time doing some basic reporting. They didn't like the interface. And also it was like very, very expensive. So basically, those companies who did point of sale in our region, they were selling software on premises, like in a box,
Right.
and you just had to invest a lot of money, and basically that's why a lot of smaller restaurants or smaller cafes, coffee shops would not be able to afford this. So they would either write, on a piece of paper, or use something like an Excel, or just, they didn't use those prefined point of sales. So we saw this like as a window of opportunity, because basically in the US, all the exciting stuff was already happening around the time. So Square was launched, Revel, Vent in New Zealand. So there was like, I don't know, up to maybe 10 well-known companies that already did point of sale at that point of time. But this never happened in Ukraine or Russia. That's why we wanted to scale like this business model and make a very usable, easy, understandable point of sale. So we differentiated ourselves as a very easy solution that works on iPad instead of this big crappy PC, and you don't have to invest a lot of money from the very beginning. You just subscribe to a monthly subscription, very easy, and the interface is just nice, and you don't have to invest a lot of time to understand how to actually run your business. So basically that happened in 2013. That was our launch. We thought of Poster as a a complementary product to our other company that we ran the weekend. But basically, in a year or something, we understood that Poster has just so much more potential, and it is growing much faster. So we sold the weekend and we closed the agency. Also, we received like a small angel investment for Poster, and we started focusing our attention solely to this company.
Very cool. So one of the questions that kind of came up to me while you were telling me the story is like, obviously there is, like there's I think the one that I know the name of off the top of my head is just Square, and you talked about it, but did you ever do any market research and try to understand why Square hadn't expanded into the Ukraine in this case?
Basically, it's very difficult to build in our market to build very global point of sale, because every country has their own regulation and fiscal compliance. So basically, you cannot just make global point of sale like software that would work everywhere, because for example, in Ukraine, in Russia, there is this thing which is called the fiscal register, which is basically a printer, like an Epson thermal printer, but it has like a special chip inside of it that would sync all of the data about sales directly to the tax authorities. And this thing happens like in a lot of countries, and more like even more countries are moving towards that. So basically, like this year, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland launched. We have now like an office in Mexico, and we're also launching in Colombia, and every Latin America country has like some kind of variation about this compliance of theirs. And even things may become even more complicated in some countries. For example, like in Russia, they also control the whole flow of alcohol from the manufacturer to the end customer of a restaurant. And this is like a single IT structure, which every software should be integrated if you sell alcohol. And this thing is going to be implemented in Ukraine as well. And like a lot of countries implement those kind of stupid regulations that make it more expensive for business to work. But basically, they also create an opportunity for IT guys like us to solve those issues.
Totally. That's really interesting. That's cool. Now, you're talking about scaling the company, and obviously like this started off and it became a success relatively quickly. You got some angel money. You started working on the product full time. How did you get the product into the hands of consumers? What was the main, kind of like sales tactic that you were implementing at this point in time, right? When you get to, like, how did you get your first 100 users?
We actually had a very promising hypothesis that all of those partners we had in our previous business in the weekend, would be interested in using our perfect point of sale because they didn't like their previous ones. But as we started, and like we talked to them, and they said, "Oh, nice, we just hate our software so much." But when we had a first prototype, they were not willing to use it actually, because this is the thing we found out about our business, is that point of sale is like in the very core of the restaurant business, and people invest so much into the software, into the processes around it, into inputting all of your data, having your statistics for the most longest period like you want, and that's why the switching cost for a business is just fabulous. I mean, it's very difficult for them to switch from one provider to another. They do this only if like they find something 10x better, or like they're really, really annoyed with their current provider and they have a lot of issues. But the good news is that restaurant business has a very high churn. So basically, restaurants close and open up. Like in the US, every year, 300,000 restaurants open up and almost the same amount closes. So basically, this is the renewal rate, which allows you, this is like the sweet spot to find a customer who's opening a restaurant and who's choosing a point of sale. So basically, all of our marketing efforts were based on this, to find places where people who open up a restaurant would go, to do a lot of digital marketing, to find them early with our blog, with our content, to help them with the opening stage, to tell them, give them checklists of the opening date and stuff like that, to find them early, to be able to capture them. But like nowadays, I think like 60-70% of our sales is made organically. So most of them are just by recommendation. So it's either existing business owner recommends poster to other businesses, or they're opening up a new restaurant, or this is like a franchise and there is a new franchisee joining and stuff like that. And then we have organic traffic, which is basically most of the time is also brand and sometimes those content related stuff or commercial keywords. So, and it's like 70-80% of our sales. So it's very difficult to buy this thing, almost impossible. When you are entering, you only have those like 20% of sales that we do using paid advertising. This is where you can compete with us in the markets we are at. So that's why there's like no easy answer on how to do lead generation. But for the very, very first customers, like 10 of them, it was important for us just to find the someone who had like at least very small, like some kind of influence in our own city. So basically, this was a Chinese tea place, which influenced a lot of other places in the city, which was like some kind of trendsetter. And they didn't use any point of sale because this was like a rather small venue, but a very trendy one. And it was very expensive for them to buy point of sale. So basically, I knew the owner, and I was trying to pitch my idea to him for a long time. But he was like always busy, and at some point he just catches me in the restaurant and says like, Rodion, you had some idea you wanted to talk about. What's that about? And I understand that he's talking to some other guy right now, and I have like very small amount of time. And at that time we had this big competitor rival called Keeper. And I just explained this. It came out of my mouth like Keeper for $50 a month. And he was just very happy, to have it and to buy it. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool. And a couple of things kind of stood out from that entire explanation, but one of them was the fact that about the same, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you mentioned that this was the same case or a similar case in Ukraine, right? Like the same amount of restaurants that close also open up within a year. So does that mean that, or at least I think you said like about 50% of the restaurants end up churning. Does that mean that you would have a churn of about 50%, I guess, year over year.
Yeah, I mean a bit less, but I think like around 40% is yearly churn. That's right.
Which
It's
I
like
guess,
crazy numbers, basically. Yeah.
yeah, and I guess that could be a bad thing or a good thing also, right? Because
Mhm.
you kind of could assume that you'll have 50% more leads for the next year, but that also means that you're losing out on 50% of the customers also, and you almost already have, without having any sort of historical data, you could somehow project what the lifetime value of each one of your customers is going to be, which
Mhm.
is, it could be useful essentially for any sort of financial projections, which is good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because we have those churn data, we understand the LTV as well, and the churn data is just crazy, and like 80% of our churn is related just to the closed business, and like only 20% the customers we're losing is because they're switching to other software or switching to back to Excel or like a piece of paper. So that things also happen as well. And like what this high churn means is that we have to be like to continue growing. We need to grow our sales even faster, because those churn in relative numbers every year, there's like more customers who churn in absolute numbers. So we need to rapidly speed up our sales just to keep going.
What is the best way so far that you've found to start increasing the number of sales that come in on any given month?
There is no easy answer. As I said, like it all comes for us from brand awareness, from working our customer health, and to encourage people to recommend poster. I mean, there's no like single growth hack, tactic, or something that you could use. Basically, for us, this is a mix of recommendations, encouraging people to recommend us, making the best product for them, and content marketing. Also, doing trade shows, trade shows, and some offline events where we could speak and tell about point of sale and how it's important for your business.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, those offline events are very difficult to track. I mean, their return of investment, and if we start to track those, we see that they're basically too negative. But we also could see that if we stop doing those events for like certain period of time, we see a drop of leads afterwards.
Mm.
So basically, we decided for ourselves that in every country where we work, we would do like almost all of the possible offline events, almost all of the possible gatherings, because it works.
Well, right, and I like to think of those as a very top of the funnel approach. That, and like you said, like you can't really track it unless, I guess, you're getting like their data directly from there and then adding it to some sort of CRM or something like that. But that might be a little bit too much work if you know that they're going to take a while to actually turn into a lead or a customer later on. But I think of it, if you did notice, like, oh, if we're going to the trade shows and we like either see a steady amount of leads coming in or a bit of an increase, that's good. But once you remove yourself from those trade shows and you start to see a decline, then that definitely tells you, like, there's something valuable in going, and it's definitely brand awareness, because it's not a trade show specifically to POS systems, which means that these people are not necessarily interested in acquiring or getting a new sort of POS at that point in time. But whenever they do, they already have you in mind because they saw you presenting the importance of it, which is good.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, what is or actually, just backtrack here a little bit, did you ever use any sort of sales rep or anything like that to get on phone calls to talk to restaurants, or has everything been very self-serve in the way that they'll just look up, find some content that's valuable, and then decide to try the free trial on their own?
You mean if we do outbound, or if we just help our customers to onboard with a sales rep?
No, yeah, more so outbound, like just picking up the phone and calling, any sort of local restaurant or anything like that to try to get.
Yeah, we tried that several times, but again, this falls into a trap of switching costs, because even mostly in Ukraine and Russia, there are several powers that encourage restaurants to have a point of sale, and point of sale is almost like an industry standard. It's nowadays very difficult to find a restaurant without one. Like those powers are, first is the fiscal compliance, so it's very difficult for you to have like the right relation with government without a point of sale. And the second one would be stealing. This is like a very big problem. It's declining over time, but there's a lot of stealing involved in the restaurant industry. That's why the precision of the inventory management and stuff in developing countries is like much more higher than in developed countries. So basically, in Ukraine, restaurant business is a very systematic business, while it doesn't even generate that much profit as like a small restaurant in Italy would, but it has much more systematic and business approach. That's why like almost all of the restaurants have a point of sale, and that's why, because of the switching costs, calling them outbound, or even we tried coming to them, going through the city, it's very difficult to convert them. One other thing which worked well is basically finding new legal entities that are just opening right now. With those we have a thing which is called like a code, and they have like a restaurant code basically, and we find those legal entities, we find those contacts, and might be the point where they don't have a software yet, so this might be a good point to contact them.
Yeah, so that's something that came into my mind right when you said that it was almost an obligation for these small restaurants to have a point of sale, because what I thought of is what you could do is, and maybe it's something you're already doing, it sounds like maybe partly, but why not create, or I don't know how hard this would be, obviously, but like try to maybe like creating a partnership with the government itself, so that you are the prescribed POS system for any sort of new restaurant that opens, and you're pretty much getting your foot in the door with every single one of them from the get-go. And then that would save you the hassle of having to say, oh, well, like none of these are going to have the switching costs, and if they do, it's going to be a switching cost from you to a different POS, which again is helping your case because you get to keep them for longer if that's the case.
I think like we're a little bit further in the concept of democracy and anti-monopolistic stuff to do that. We, of course, that would be a great idea to do if that would be possible. Yeah,
definitely. Now, to kind of switch gears here, we've got a couple of minutes, but what is the number one, marketing challenge that you've experienced so far, whether that is overall or whether that is any sort of, kind of like a hard stop that you have from, I don't know, the policies from the government and stuff like that, but is there anything that kind of holds you back from doing certain things that you would like to try?
I mean, there is a lot of efforts that we put into those fiscal compliances, which basically you don't give any additional value to business. You don't, allow them to earn more, to bring more customers, to lower their costs. It's just the compliance. So, and we need to stay up to date with those ever-changing laws. And that's like a very difficult thing to do. In terms of like marketing challenge, I can tell about the one we're facing right now. It's in Latin America, and basically Latin America is Mexico specifically is like 3 to 5 years before Ukraine in terms of technology adoption. That's why people are not used to right now to buy subscription products yet, and they like exactly the same thing that's happened to us in Ukraine back then is happening right now in Latin America, because like the product is a bit too much for them, because they don't do this, this deep down inventory, ingredient granularity level and stuff like that. They are not used to buying monthly product. They don't always understand the concept of cloud software. So, and basically, we need to rebuild again our product, our onboarding process, our marketing efforts, and do it differently in that market than we're used to right now in our home markets. to, because like the conversion rate is like 3 to 5 times lower in LATAM just of this, because of this gap in understanding. And this is like one of the biggest challenge right now.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. I'm actually from Mexico, so I can understand how some of those things might be the case. But yeah, that's definitely interesting. Now to switch gears again and just talk a little bit more about the personal side of, running a business, a startup. What is one thing that if you could go back to, say, day one, knowing what you know now, would you do anything differently?
I don't like those general wise things that you could say to yourself. From a more like pragmatic and product related things that we're facing right now, I would say that it would be easier if we started making the product mobile first from the day one, because basically this was already a trend, but we just missed it, I think, at some point. Mm-hmm. And it's it's difficult to convert a product which is basically already an enterprise software, to move it. It moves really slowly into the mobile first paradigm, and also maybe start scaling internationally earlier, like just as soon as we had something to reinvest, because those stories are long as well. It takes time, to receive some credibility on a certain market. So that's why starting earlier, brings you earlier to something you want to get.
Totally. And I see a couple of books back there, so I'm going to assume that they're yours. Do you have a favorite book that's somewhat business related?
It's difficult to find like the very favorite one, but from the last several years, I would choose Understanding Michael Porter by I think John Margaret is the author. Like there is this well-known theorist of business and competition and rivalry, Michael Porter, but his works are just too big and difficult to understand. And there is John Margaret, she's his associate, and she make like a very nice summary of all of his ideas. And this is something I really liked, and all of our management team read it. So yeah, this one.
Cool. Awesome. Wants to check that out. And where can people find you online?
Facebook, Twitter.
Okay. And last question here. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I think it was like a very clever idea of yours to run this podcast. So I was wondering, what is like one of the several most practical things you've learned from founders in those podcasts that you could implement in your own business?
Totally. So one of the things that's one of the questions that I get a lot, but one of the things that has always stuck with me, and this one's from the founder of Funnel CRM. I don't know if you've heard of it, but he mentioned, to do things that do not scale, which is a very good advice, just because it's true, right? Like you're always going to be talking to humans and mainly like thinking forward now, where everybody's thinking about automation and doing all these different things and, sending SMS automatically and then telling people that it's you, but it's not really you, and that sort of thing, that like you can definitely scale it, but people can read through the lines and realize, okay, like this is definitely not like a personal message or anything like that. But I think sometimes specifically in SaaS companies, right, where a lot of the things are done with a chatbot or online or self-serve, I think it's really nice to maybe like get a phone call every once in a while, like talk to your customers and actually understand what their problem is, that sort of thing. So, and it's obviously not doing it all the time because, again, it's not scalable, but doing some of those things I think can be really, really valuable and bring a lot of insight into whether it's, the founder, the sales team, the marketing team, whatever they may be. But that's one of the things that I've always thought of as super valuable, for sure.
Yeah, that's a nice one. Thank you.
But so that concludes the podcast. Thank you so much, Rodion, for being on here. It was a pleasure having you. I think you have a great story, so I think people will really like every piece of insight that you shared, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.